Walcott, who can run away from them. Blind trying to buy him a bit of time. Ozil, two!
This is Barkley, away from Otamendi. He's got two runners to his left and one to his right. Barkley wants to go alone, and why not?
Manchester City are still alive here. Balotelli, Aguero!
Hello and welcome to the Football Hipsters English Breakfast. I am your host Kris, as I always am, and I'm joined by my regular co-host and only regular co-host this evening. It's Ross. Good evening, Ross.
Good evening.
Just the two of us tonight, my friend. So we'll just see if we can pull our way through the various bits and bobs that have gone on in the English leagues and League Cups this weekend. So Danny's putting his feet up because he's had a busy weekend, or week I should say, having his bathroom done. So he's having a well-deserved night off. He hasn't actually done anything, but he just feels he needs the night off. So we'll leave him in peace. So let's get straight on to what's what then. The first thing I have to say before we get into this week's action, as many of our listeners will have heard, I can only apologise profusely for my terrible audio on Monday's podcast. We had some headset issues. Hopefully, fingers crossed, they've been solved. I have a new headset, so touch wood, we should be all right. But I just want to pass on my apologies once again for the poor audio of Monday's pod, and indeed for there being no Satchel on Thursday. Both myself and John had schedules that clash. So hopefully that means the listeners have been missing us lots and they're ready for us to talk football. So let's get on with it then, Ross. Let's start with Friday. And we've got a mixture of sort of FA Cup, Championship and Premier League to cover this weekend. And on Friday, we had Crystal Palace getting the FA Cup quarterfinals underway. And they played Reading. What did you make of the game? Bit dull? Did the right team go through?
You probably have to say so. I mean, it wasn't the prettiest game. I was playing a Pokemon game at the same time, and I spent most of the time looking at my DS rather than the game because it was just so dull. But it came alive in the last 5 minutes or so. The penalty decision and then Campbell's late goal. For me, I think, as someone that watches a lot of the Championship, I was kind of hoping to see Reading turn up a bit more than they did, especially considering Crystal Palace have been in absolute freefall in the Premier League. But at the same time, I suppose the quality came through, and all it needed was one moment and one goal, and it got it through a bit of a contentious penalty decision. So I suppose on the night the right team went through, but I think, realistically speaking, it's a bit of a disappointment from what I thought would be quite a good cup time.
It all seemed to catch fire late on. Talk us through that penalty, because it's one of those weekends where I'm sure a lot of people who regularly watch Match of the Day have actually not seen a lot of highlights, because it's been such a weird kind of weekend of football, of some league games, some cup games. So I'm sure a lot of people haven't seen this. So just talk the listeners through what actually happened for that penalty.
Yeah, there was a ball over the top, and I believe it was Cooper, the centre back for Reading, who puts his hand across Balassi, actually, I think it was. He puts his hand across Balassi's chest, and Balassi goes down, obviously, like he's been shot, because you would in that situation. It's extremely soft. There's not a great deal of infringement. It's not even like a push. It's not a touch that's going to stop you running forward, but it's a touch nonetheless. And it reminds me a lot of the Delaney penalty the week beforehand against Liverpool, where I believe I said that as someone that loves the defensive side, that is a tackle that you have to make. It's a kind of movement you have to make. I mean, it's just a hand across the chest. But in that situation, when it's so late in the game, when it's the last man, that player is going to go down. And you have to know that as a defender, that player is going to make the most out of any touch he feels, especially in the 86th minute of a quarterfinal when Wembley is on the line. He's going to go down. And if he's going to go down, then the referee's going to make a decision. And sometimes it's going to go in your favour and sometimes it's not. Stupid decision from Cooper to go in as he did, but at the same time, extremely soft penalty, shouldn't have been given. But it's one of those things that the referee had to make a choice, and he's made it.
You and I are both wrestling fans, and I think it's fair to say that the few pieces of acting we've seen in the past few weeks of players going down, they wouldn't be sort of not seen in WWE rings, would they? The minimal contact, but the maximum reaction for effect is quite scary, really. But people fall for it. What's your thoughts on this situation of where do you stand on these penalty decisions? I mean, there's quite a lot of sequences we've seen recently where players almost seem to put a leg in and then they withdraw it. We'll talk about Diego Costa, who he certainly didn't put his leg in. He put another part of his anatomy in and then withdrew. So where do you stand on the intent side of things? Are you for all for it has to be full contact, or is intent enough for you?
Um, it's the eternal question, really, because it changes case by case. All I really want, the same as anyone wants, is the right decision. Or if you're not going to get the right decision, then to have balance across the game. If you're going to give a penalty like that Cooper gives away in that quarter final, then you want to see Reading get a penalty for something similar if it happened. Now, I'm not saying there were instances like that at the other end, but I'm sure a Reading fan will be able to find one that says, is that any worse than that one? If the intent is there, then you've got to take it case by case. I certainly agree that there are some red cards that are dished out purely because there's too much force in it, and I do agree that you've got to remind players you can't go in full-blooded to everything. Not everything demands that, because then you end up with a Lee Cattermole or a Joey Barton that just gets sent off all the time because they put their heart into everything. But for me, I just want the right decisions, and if I can't get the right decisions, then I want balance for the wrong decisions. And I think that was just a silly soft penalty. But at the same time, like I said a minute ago, for me personally, you can't do it. You can't make a challenge like that because someone's going to go down, whether you intended to do that or block him off or not. The player's going to make the most of it. But yeah, it's contentious, I suppose. But at the same time, for me, it's all about getting either balance or getting it right. And I'm sure that'll balance out over the course of the season for Reading. But for the short term, that's not a decision they will look favourably on.
No, and I think it's a case of defenders just have to be a bit more smart, don't they? And as you say, when you go to ground or you throw yourself in, I know it's a reactional thing. I know it's one of those you've got to fight the body to not do it, but defenders have got to be a bit more cute when they're making these challenges. At least jockey players away from the areas of danger, maybe. But
one thing I'd say about that Reading one is that Cooper is only 21 years old. He's going to make mistakes like that, and there will be moments like that. But for a player like Delaney last week, I think that was a worse penalty to give away because he's much more experienced. He should know better than to go in at that point in the game.
Yeah, I think Brian McDermott come out, didn't he, after the game, and he very much defended his player and said, he's young and he's making mistakes and he'll learn from it, and he was devastated and whatnot. So yeah, I think fair play to him indeed. But from that, we saw the penalty just about converted by Cabaye, and then a late finish to the game from Fraser Campbell, which secured the points, and that sees Palace into the next round, and Reading obviously can go back to focusing on the Championship. So that was our game on the Friday. Then we moved on to the Saturday. Now we have some Premier League games spliced in here, so we'll kind of cover the FA Cup first, and then we'll come back to the Premier League after that. So with the FA Cup game on the Saturday, we saw Chelsea play Everton. Now, this was a game that it took quite a lot of time to get going. It was a lot of blood and thunder. There was a lot of effort, a lot of energy, but not a lot of quality from both sides. And then Romelu Lukaku did something rather special, to be fair. And I know I'm mocked regularly for my my lack of I don't know what the word is, lack of faith in him being top quality. But you can't deny the first goal was pretty special, wasn't it?
Oh, it was. It was exactly what that game needed, because it had 0-0 written all over it for about 70 minutes, and then Lukaku danced around about 4 different people and put it in. It's a brilliant goal, especially for a player of his size. I didn't think he had that nimble ability to him, but it's a fantastic bit of skill, fantastic goal, and it certainly helped everyone on the way.
It was a fine piece of skill, it has to be said, and of course I'm going to do the old Alan Hansen trick here, but defending was shocking, wasn't it? Let's be honest.
Oh, it was. Yeah, I suppose it was mainly based on the fact they didn't want to go anywhere near him, just in case it was a penalty. But you still got to dedicate a bit more than the Chelsea defenders did.
Yeah, absolutely, and hats off. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he then goes and does it again with 5 minutes later to seal the passage through, I should say. And wouldn't you know it, a Roberto Martinez side kept a clean sheet and defended quite well. Is this the sign that the world is about to end?
Possibly. I hadn't thought of it like that, but it's a very good possibility, because for as long as I've watched Martinez at Everton, it's looked exactly like the Wigan side, except they win a few more games because they're a better quality team. They go gung ho and they can't keep him out. I think they were helped by the fact that Chelsea were really not on it yesterday. They didn't look at their best, but you can only beat what's in front of you, and they did a good job considering the front four. It's still a very offensive Chelsea side they played.
most Chelsea sides are offensive to me, but I'm joking, Chelsea. I'm joking, of course. But no, I mean it was a clinical display from Everton, and it has to be said. I don't know where I sit with Martinez. Where do you sit? I mean, obviously you've got a lot of experience watching in the Championship, so you would have seen what he did at Wigan, good and bad. I listen to phone-ins on a regular basis, and as an Arsenal fan, of course, I'm very well versed in people's overreaction to managers. I certainly can speak on behalf of people on that one, but I hear these Everton fans calling up on a regular basis, absolutely livid with Martinez and saying that he's got no ambition and he's tactically inept and everything. And then I sort of look at them yesterday and I think that's not a bad performance. I mean, where do you sit with the Martinez? Do you think he sort of gets away with it, or do you think he is actually quite good, but there's something lacking?
There's absolutely something lacking. I think Paul Merson put it beautifully a couple of weeks ago on Soccer Saturday when he said you can watch Everton and they can get absolutely hammered, and they can look beautiful going forward, but they'll just leak goals. And then you'll watch Roberto Martinez in the presser after the game, and it's like someone's used that Men in Black eraser wand on you, and suddenly you've forgotten how bad they were because you just kind of buy into his message. He's got a really attractive style of football, and that's what people want to see. They want to be entertained by their football. And more to the point, he was the Everton fans' pick. When Moyes left, they were overwhelmingly in favour of getting Martinez in. So there has to be, some kind of familial feeling between the fans and the manager. But at the same time, you look at the defensive record, you look at the position in the league, there's no reason they couldn't have been challenging for the top four this season, except for the fact their defence is so poor because of Martinez's determination to play this offensive style. And when it pays off, it's brilliant. But when it goes wrong, it's hideous.
Yeah, it's almost like it's just all or nothing, isn't it? There's no in between with Big Roberto.
I think Martinez would make a fantastic Real Madrid or Barcelona manager. Really, really do, because they are a team that can just flow forward, and it doesn't matter if they score a goal because they can score 3 more. But a team like Everton, a team like Swansea, a team like Wigan, they're not built for that, and you've got to be able to coach the back line, and it just doesn't seem like he's got that in him.
No, I like that. I might bring that up with Tom tomorrow because I think we could have a good chat on that. So yeah, I think I will indeed mention that. Good shout. But we can't escape the elephant in the room, or the elephant-looking man in the room, perhaps. Diego Costa. We should say at this point, in favour of balance, Gareth Barry was also dismissed very soon after this incident. But the incident of which I speak is Costa's second booking. He was booked early on and then received his marching orders in the 84th minute for what appeared to be a retaliation, which Gareth Barry used all his experience. I think he actually baited him quite well, I thought, given what Costa has made a bit of a living on. But what did you make of the reaction? And I'll ask you the question everyone's been asked: bite or no bite?
I am going to go with Gareth Barry and say it's no bite. I think he comes out of this smelling like roses. I know he got sent off, but no one's going to remember that. They're just going to remember the fact that, he could have just said, oh yeah, Diego Costa bit me. Yeah, I was, teeth marks in the neck. But he came out and he said, no, he didn't bite me. Let's calm down. So full credit to Gareth Barry for that. I don't side on the argument that just because it's Diego Costa it was a bite. Gareth Barry's going to know better than anyone. It's a complete overreaction. It's typical Diego Costa, except that I don't think he's ever done something like this before. At least if he has, I haven't seen it. It's probably a sign that he's just getting frustrated with how things are going at Chelsea, with where they are, with going out of the FA Cup, going out of the Capital One. No real chance of winning the Premier League this year. Barely any chance of them getting to the Europa League spots or the Champions League spots. To me, it was just a bit of overflow of emotion, which is what Diego Costa does best. But I would have to side with Barry because he's going to know better than anyone whether that was a bite or not.
Yeah, I must admit I didn't realise he'd made comments, so that's interesting that he's come out and said that. If that's the case, interesting. But I think it's fair to say Mr. Costa is no angel, and if he was, he wouldn't have the edge of his game that he definitely has.
Do you think it's a sign that he wants to go? A reaction like that?
I don't know about that reaction.
There's a lot of speculation. I know, especially Sky have been covering it this weekend about how it's a sign that he's getting frustrated and he wants to go.
Yeah, I mean, I can see. I mean, this could open a whole new topic, which we may well cover actually on when we do our live pod in a few weeks time. But Chelsea looked to me like a side in major need of surgery, and I'd be very interested to see if it is indeed Conte that they bring in, as to whether he will stand for some of the things that Costa goes, because the Italian game, as you will well know, is not the cleanest at times, and there's a dark art there. But I don't think he'd last 2 minutes in Italy, and I do wonder if there is a sign that he might want to move on. You look at the way Eden Hazard's played this year. You look at someone like Oscar, John Terry. Obviously, the rumours about him. There's a lot of surgery. I don't even think Thibaut Courtois been anywhere near as good this season. So Chelsea strike me as a side that there's a lot of those players, even Fabregas. A lot of those players that just don't seem to fit what they're trying to do at the moment. And I think as good a job as Hiddink has done, it sort of masks their failings, if you get me. And I think Costa is tied up in that. And his game it suited Spain so much, and I do wonder. If next season in particular, teams will find out. Gareth Barry hit the jackpot, really, didn't he? He provoked the reaction, he got it, and I think more and more centre halves are starting to get wise to this. Not Arsenal centre halves, of course, because we're good at falling for that. But
there were stories from Spain that Atletico Madrid want to bring him back in the summer.
I could see that. Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Distinct possibility. I know they've just lost some of their key strikers. They used to have a bit of a reputation of bringing in really good strikers when they lost one, and I think it was Jackson Martinez, wasn't it, that they missed the boat on last time round. So they need another striker. Costa knows that place well. I wouldn't be surprised if he wants to go back. I don't believe this bite is a sign that he wants to go. Don't get me wrong, but it's certainly an interesting debate.
Sign of frustration, absolutely. And one Antoine Griezmann moving the other way is something I could certainly see, which would upset me and Tom, I'm sure, quite a lot. But nevertheless, Everton are through. Costa, I believe, will miss the next league game. I think I'm right in saying with a one-game ban. So, not good for him. Right, we'll take a brief break from FA Cup then to go over the Saturday Premier League games. We'll start at Carrow Road, where Manchester City and Norwich, I think they played drafts for 90 minutes. It wasn't the most entertaining game. Who does this game favour more? I mean, does it favour either? Because Norwich home games, you've got to think they've got to be winning. Man City, they've just got to be winning full stop. It struck me as a game that neither side wanted to lose and neither side really did enough to win. So where do they go from here, both sides?
Honestly, I think the side that's going to be happiest with that result is going to be West Ham or Arsenal or Man United, or one of the teams that is looking at Man City and either concerned about their position or looking to climb over them. Norwich, I think that's a bonus point. I don't think they expected to get anything from that game. I certainly didn't expect them to keep a clean sheet, let alone get anything more than that. So, yeah, I mean, that's a free point for Norwich as far as they're going to be concerned. For Man City, that's 2 dropped. But it's the teams around Man City that are going to look at that and go, wow, we can see there's blood in the water now. Man City are really, really shaking. And, it's still a long season. There's still 8 more games to go or whatever it is now. So I think that's a big result for the teams around them. But for both the teams involved in that match, that's a huge point for Norwich.
Absolutely. And what do you make of this? I mean, the Man City thing, we haven't really discussed it in too much stats before, but do you buy into this idea that since the big reveal of Pep coming, the biggest kept secret or worst kept secret in the Premier League, I mean, Bayern Munich is still winning in the Bundesliga. I think it's fair to say their form has dropped a little bit. There's a lot of talk that Guardiola's been flying around here, there and everywhere, speaking to different agents, trying to line up players for Man City. And, is this almost Pellegrini's... I wouldn't say he doesn't care, but there's got to be something in his head thinking, well, I've got pretty good stock. I've won things. I'll probably get another job. Do I need to put as much in? Or do you just think it's just City being the way they have been this season?
I'm not in favour of saying things like teams switch off for their managers when they know they're leaving or when they know someone else is coming in. But I think it's undeniable considering how Man City and Bayern are doing. It's not like it's one of them, it's both of them. Both of them losing their manager, both of them know who's coming in next, and both of them are faltering. I don't think that's coincidence. As for Pellegrini, I'm sure Pellegrini's doing everything he can. I don't get that feeling from Pellegrini that he doesn't give anything less than absolutely everything. So I'm not in favour of putting this at Pellegrini's door. But at the same time, if the players are slacking off and the players are saying, well, you're not going to be here, we've now got to impress Pep, or even some of them saying, well, we're probably not going to impress Pep, so let's just ride it out for a couple more months. That must have a knock-on effect on a manager. That must do, because you can't work around people like that and not get dragged down by it yourself. So strange situation. I mean, we could have a debate an hour long about whether Pep's going to be a success or not, or whether they'll turn this round. But right now, they've just got to make sure they get fourth, because Pep's not going to want any of them if they don't get fourth.
No, it's almost Agent Pellegrini sabotaging his potential or his replacement suitor and taking him out of the Champions League. But of course, let's not forget they are still in the Champions League and indeed will, well, barring an absolute collapse, they should make the quarterfinals. And then
I suppose that's the other thing, is that they're bringing Pep in to win the Champions League. Pellegrini's going to want to win that. Yeah. Pellegrini's going to want to grab that cup and say, well, if you just stuck with me, then we would have been all right. So maybe they are prioritising Champions League. Maybe that is the point. But it's like, I think I mentioned this last week, my friend Levi said that, are they favouriting the Champions League? Well, they've got to make sure they're in it next season first. They shouldn't be thinking about the cup. Just make sure you're back in it next year.
It does have a whiff of Roberto Di Matteo, doesn't it, about it? The old win and then be sacked kind of thing. But I can't. I don't know about you, but I can't see City going anywhere near Barcelona, Bayern Munich, or I don't even think City beat PSG right now. I just think it's too difficult to raise your game when you're playing so poorly in the Premier League to then suddenly up it. I would struggle to see how they could win it, but I could be wrong. So
well, the away form's been terrible all season as well. And European competitions they've been poor in since they got their money. So that doesn't play in their favour either.
No, and too many big players. Again, not in form, and I think there's again another club that's in need of major surgery. But nevertheless, we got a good discussion out of a pretty poor 0-0 draw. So let's move on. Let's have a trip to Stoke. Your boys went up to Stoke, and you said it in our group, and I think we can, as Arsenal fans, we can definitely relate to this. It's not the most favourable place to go, Stoke, particularly at this time of the year, and all the cliches that go with it. But it's fair to say that I think you've fully merited a 2-1 victory. Were you happy? I know you've got something to say about the sending off as well. So just sort of fill us in on your thoughts on the game and indeed that red card for Mane.
Yeah, I mean, it was won and lost in the first half. If I'm honest, I didn't think we'd win. I thought at the very best we'd get a 1-1 draw. That was my prediction before the game. I didn't see us winning. It's never nice to go to the Britannia. They're a tough team to beat. They've gotten better and better under Mark Hughes. And the recent run we've been on with Chelsea, Bournemouth and Sunderland all taking points off us, I didn't like the look of this fixture. But fair play. We turned up the first half. We won the game. Pella hasn't scored since November. To see him get 2 is astounding. And it's great for him because he's one of those players that really does play for the shirt, and it's really nice to see him score 2. Butland really should have been doing better for that second one, but as a Southampton fan, I'll take it. The first half, Stoke were just so off colour, and thankfully we were on form and we managed to get the goals that push us across the line. Second half, they came out and they looked a lot better. You might want to say we got a bit lucky, a bit fortunate in the second half because they did really, really push us. But at the same time, we have got one of the best defences in the Premier League. We've still got one of the best goalkeepers in the Premier League, despite his recent bad form. It all came together. It was the kind of performance that we'd been lacking at other times, to get the hard work done first and then just fall back on what we know and just defend and keep the points safe. So big 3 points for us. Stoke, I don't think they'll cry too much over it. It was just one of those games for them. They've just got to improve for the next outing. But second half, they had more than enough to be happy with. The red card for Mane was an absolute joke, because if you haven't seen it, what essentially happens is the ball is in the air. Mane is challenging for it. I can't think of who it is he goes up to challenge with now. But he goes to challenge for it. He heads the ball. And as he puts his head in to go for the ball, he just kind of clips the player, not even touches him from what I can see from the angle. Very, very minimum contact. A player like Sadio Mane headbutting someone or clashing heads with someone, he's going to go down as well. He's going to feel that because he's not exactly the biggest, thickest guy in the world. The Stoke player goes down like he's been headbutted, and Mane just walks away and carries on running and playing the game because he's not got it. And when I was watching it, I thought he'd pulled out of the header. I didn't think he'd gone in for it as well as he could have. But the Stoke player goes down, makes a meal of it. Mane gets sent off for what I think is minimal contact. For me, if that's a red card, then you're sending everyone off in a game, because everyone puts in a challenge like that, and it's something and nothing. And unfortunately, that puts us up to something like 6 red cards now, which is the worst disciplinary record in the Premier League, which isn't something I'm used to as a Southampton fan. But that was one that Koeman says he's going to try and rescind, and hopefully will get rescinded, because it was a joke of a red card.
Yeah, no, I think you've summed that up perfectly well. I think it was Philip Volscheid, I think, from memory, was the guy. I may be wrong, but it looked like him looking back at the replay. So yeah, it was just a coming together. It's really, really bizarre. But
I will have to say that the concerning thing about that is that after the game, there was a reporter that tried to get a word with Sadio Mane as he came off, and the reporter said, "Sadio, are Southampton gonna, try and appeal this red card?" And he just shrugged and just carried on walking. That concerns me as a Southampton fan. That's concerning because Mane looks like a player that wants to go. Mane looks like a player that's not got his heart in it at the moment, and to have such a soft red card given and to not immediately turn around to the journalist and say, "Oh, of course they will. That was, it was a stupid red card." To just shrug and go, "Well, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not bothered. Whatever they want to do." That for me is a big concern.
just a bit of a worry, isn't it? You want a bit more fire from that, don't you? Absolutely.
For me, it just kind of spells that Mane doesn't have that much faith in the club, or he feels the club don't have faith in him. That's the impression I get from that. Either way, I think that's a bad sign.
And quickly on I've forgotten his bloody name. Graziano Pelle. Kind of looking at the bloody name, couldn't get it in my head. You said before you expect him, or you have a feeling that he might leave. Do you still think that's going to be the case, even with these couple of goals? Do you think maybe anything's changed in his head, or do you still expect him to go?
I don't think it would be the club's choice to let him go. I think it would be his because he's still a big part of the way we play. We haven't got many strikers unless we've got someone else lined up, but I can't think of too many big strikers, target men in the world, frankly, that we could get in to replace him. So I don't think it would be the club's choice to let him go at the end of the season. But I think it's possible. I still think it's possible because his stock is as high as it's ever been. And I know there's a lot of interest from Italy. So if someone comes in for him, he's going to want to move in the same way that Ricky Lambert would have wanted to move when Liverpool came in for him. So, he's got to love playing for Southampton again. And I think those 2 goals have gone a long way to help that. But, there's still a long way to go. And, the annoying thing is with Pella, he could go the rest of the season without scoring one now. So for me, it's just a case of waiting and seeing. But I don't think it's the club's choice if he does go.
Yeah, it's going to be. I think there'll be a lot of interest in Italy. Definitely. I'll probably poke John for that one, but I can see a lot of probably decent sides in Italy be looking to take him. So
Juventus are the one that are linked with him around here. I don't see that personally, but it's still possible.
No, I could see more of a Fiorentina sort of Lazio type, particularly Lazio. I think with Miroslav Klose probably coming towards the end of his time, maybe I could see that. But
Pella's 30 years old now. I could very easily see him going back to Italy to retire. So I wouldn't begrudge him. But we've got a couple more games to go yet. Let's wait and see.
And he does have lovely hair. We should always mention
he does.
that, of course.
Yes.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the other Saturday game. The only other Saturday game: AFC Bournemouth 3, Swansea 2. Surely Bournemouth are safe now. Do we dare say it? I mean, that sides have been informed that they've been informed before and still gone down, but they just kept going, didn't they? From a goal up, they pulled back to 1-1, 2-1 up, pulled back to 2-2, and they still had the sort of the wherewithal to go and win that game. So, do you think it's safe to say that they're safe now?
Yeah, I thought they were safe last week because 38 points is a great position. They are not going to lose all of their games till the end of the season. They will pick up some points to push them over the edge of 40. And I don't see Norwich, Newcastle or Aston Villa getting anywhere near that points total. So for me, they're safe. I'm just concerned about them next season personally. But no, for this year, fantastic for Bournemouth. Fantastic for Southampton as well to see Bournemouth stay up. So, yeah, I great achievement by Eddie Howe and Bournemouth. I think it's a fantastic job they've done there.
Yeah, Eddie Howe's comes across really well, doesn't he, in all interviews? And I know you've always got to be a bit careful because you have the Owen Coyles, the Gary Monks, etc., and things go a bit wrong. But everything that Eddie Howe seems to say, whether it's about a former club, a former player, or a current player, he's always very articulate. I think he's going to be. Very, very sought after in the future. Could certainly see him at a higher level club. No disrespect to Bournemouth, we shall see. And good to see Max Gradel back on the score sheet because he was very much a player I was looking forward to watching, having seen him in Liga for St Etienne. I thought he'd do really well for Bournemouth, and then he got that injury so early on. So nice to see him back. I think it's fair to say. So that was it for the Saturdays. We will touch on a couple of championship stories in a minute, but we'll just skip on to Sunday and the other notable games before we do so. So on the Sunday fixtures, we'll skip back to the FA Cup. Arsenal. Yeah. See, this is the joy of hosting a podcast, people. When you have to talk about the team you love, and you have to talk about them failing yet again, because it is another failure. Losing at home to Watford, who I have to say, being in the interest of fairness and neutrality, if that's even a word, I've just made one up. If not, I think Watford thoroughly deserved the victory, particularly on their second half performance alone. Pretty sterile first half, 0-0. Watford then changed their system. They changed the tactics, went 4-4-2, and it's fair to say stunned Arsenal in the second half. How good do you think this is for the FA Cup, given that Watford have upset the apple cart here, as obviously Everton have beaten Chelsea as well? And also just touch on Arsenal. I mean, where does this leave their season? And could you see this being a pivotal result, particularly with what's going on with the manager there at the moment?
Well, first of all, I think it's great for the FA Cup. I'm a big fan of this competition, and as a Southampton fan, I think it's one that we could win. I think it's one that any of the teams left in it could still win. I don't think there's anyone that you'd say is weaker in terms of the FA Cup. It's a fantastic story to see any one of the teams getting through to the semi-final, let alone the final. So I'm all for it. I think it's going to be a fantastic FA Cup final this year. Arsenal is a completely different kettle of fish, because a few weeks ago I was right on board with you and so many other Arsenal fans. Arsenal going to win the league. I thought it was tied up. I thought it was all in their hands, and they have thrown it away. You know, there's no way around it. To look at where they were at Christmas to where they are now it's a joke. It's ridiculous how far Arsenal have gone and how far they've fallen. I'm interested that you used the word failure in this one, because if the season ended today, would you call this season a failure for Arsenal? Because I'd be very tempted to. Very, very tempted to, with Chelsea with the way they were, with Man United the way they were, City, Liverpool, the fact that Leicester are up there. I'd say this was a failure of a season.
Do you know what? It's a really tough one. Really tough one. I mean, I'm always the optimist. I'll always try and find a positive in a massive sea of negatives. But do you know what I think is the bigger failure this season is that all of our, I use the preference of the word "our" of Arsenal fans, is that there's so many Arsenal fans that have said all this season, this was the season. You know, if there was ever an opportunity, so many other teams failing around us, and truth be told, that's what I have a bigger problem with, because I look at it and I say, well, why is it everyone else has to fail for us to have a chance? And in a weird way, I think that might have counted against us in a strange way. Whether that's taken the focus off the players, whether the managers got a bit complacent, whether there's just a general malaise at the club and they just expect to turn up and beat teams, I don't know. But it's something is systematically wrong at so many levels, and I do think a lot of Arsenal's players think a little bit too highly of themselves, dare I say. I'm not in the camp of wanting the manager's head on a platter. I never will be. I've got more respect for him than that personally. But one thing's for sure, we spoke earlier on about Chelsea and Manchester City needing major surgery. I look at the team I love, and I think that there's massive changes need to be made there. And they're at all levels, I should stress, the board level. The manager will have to look at his own failings. Again, we'll use that word, because as you rightly say, Ross, if they don't win it, I don't think you can use any other word other than failure, to be honest. And that hurts me as much as anybody to admit, but it is a failure.
I mean, there was something I was thinking of earlier today when I saw the scoreline, because I was watching Birmingham versus Wolves, so I missed most of this game, and then I flicked between it while they were on half time when the game ended. A thought that occurred to me was, I've been a football fan since about 2006. That's when I really got into it. For as long as I've really been into football, for the 10 years I have known football and have been as into it as I am now, and it's going to sound harsh, but to say as of right now, at this point in the season, because Arsenal could still win the league, it's not out of the realm of possibility that they could win the league, or something incredible could happen during the week against Barcelona. They could still win something. But if the season ended right now, I would have to say over the last 10 years, Arsenal have regressed under Arsene Wenger. I don't think he's moved them forward enough. I don't think he's done anywhere near enough, considering how the image I had of Arsene Wenger when I started watching football was of a great, great manager, one that turned an Arsenal side into an invincible Arsenal side. The 10 years that I've been watching Arsenal, they have been nowhere near as good. And all the hype I've heard about Arsenal and the legacy of Arsenal, I haven't seen it. In the last 10 years, I haven't seen a single inch of it. And this season was the big chance. This season was the time for Arsenal to get back on it and show people they can still do it. But they've managed to miss it. I don't get it. I physically don't understand what has gone wrong for Arsenal this season, because at this point in the season, it almost feels like at the start of the year when we were saying they can win the league, it almost feels like they were punching above their weight being up there. It's just how they look on the field, especially in games like this where you think, it's fine, Arsenal have got this. They've won 3 games since the turn of the year. That's shocking. That's miserable considering how the league's been this year. For me, I can't help but say that Arsenal have gone backwards, and I don't want to say Arsene Wenger out, and I don't want to turn this into an Arsene Wenger in or out discussion because we could be here for absolutely hours. I like him. I think he's a great manager. He will go on his own terms if he stays for another year, 2, 4, 5, whatever he wants to do. I'll still be in Arsenal's favour. But right now, I don't think he's moved them forward enough.
I think it's perfectly put. I can't argue with that. I really can't. And I'm not in or out when it comes to the manager. I'm an Arsenal fan, and that's it. I don't sit in one camp or another. Frankly, I'm bored of it. But one thing's for sure: a result like today, when arguably, I know a lot of Arsenal fans were saying that would an FA Cup win mean that our season was saved? Well, that's out the window now. I don't think any sane Arsenal fan believes that they're going to go to Barcelona and overturn that deficit, although I do have a sneaky feeling we might get something from the game, but certainly not the tie. And as you say, the league is not over. We should remember that. We could be sat here in 12 or 10 weeks going, well, that was bizarre.
The focus is on it now. The focus is absolutely on that now. And here's the thing for Arsenal fans. If you think the season's over, great. But you've still got one left to fight for. Even if you get absolutely trounced in Spain during the week, there's still this. The league is still there. I mean, it's not what's the word I'm looking for? Perhaps plausible at the moment because of the way Leicester are playing, especially if they win tomorrow night against Newcastle. It might not look plausible, but it's still there. And if you can get up into second, if you can get above Tottenham, I would still say at the end of this season, if you finish second above Tottenham, or if you get first, it's been a good year. But anything less than finishing above Tottenham, if you finish below them and you've lost all these competitions, I think questions have to be asked. But I still think that as of right now, Arsenal can look back, turn back to the league and say, right, let's go for gold. Let's go for it. And if you fail there, then yeah, maybe you've got to start seriously looking at the top. But, it's swings and roundabouts, but it's a strange enigma as Arsenal.
Absolutely. And just to wrap up the Arsenal talk there, if Arsenal does decide that his time is done, and some of the quotes tonight have been quite quite blunt, really. I mean, he's one quote that really struck me today, where he said, "You're always in the middle of a drama. It's becoming a farce." That's very very sort of outspoken for Arsenal. But if he does decide that his time is sort of done at the club at the end of the season, I make no apologies for saying to you straight to your face, Ross, I'd like your manager.
No,
So,
I think he's the best man for the job. I don't want him to go. I don't know who we'd get in after, because all the good managers are taken, I think. I mean, Kike Sanchez-Flores and Eddie Howe and anyone that I might think we'd go after, I don't think they'd be that interested at this point. But, for me, I think it's a great move for Koeman, and I think Arsenal would be fantastic for him.
A very nice blend of the steel of George Graham and the tactical sort of awareness and flair of Arsene Wenger in his heyday, I think. So
He'll stay. He'll stay.
Yep.
The build up to him signing for us was that he wanted to sit somewhere and stay and build an empire, and he'd want to do that at Arsenal. He'd get the chance to do that as well.
And what better place than to rub it in Barcelona's face to take Arsenal to be a next superpower? I mean, he'd love that, wouldn't he, Ronald? He would love that. Anyway, we should give a nod to Adeline Guardiola's exceptional strike, has to be said. I mean, I think he could hit 20,000 of those and not one of them would go anywhere near the goal. But apparently in training he does it regularly. I've heard that 1,000 times. But
did I not hear today Arsenal fans saying that someone should have kept that out? That Ospina should have kept it out?
A few people with limited brain power, I think, did say that.
I mean, the pace that generates, there is no one in the world that is that quick to react to a shot that's going that fast. No. Even if they were, you're not getting a hand to that. That's taking you in with it. It's
Exactly.
ridiculous goal.
You know when it's a hard or when it's a bullet, when even the replay in slow-mo struggles to keep up with the pace of the ball. So no, I think even if it had been Peter Cech and goal, I think he probably would have gone in the net with it, as you say. So no,
Yeah, he's not Spider-Man. He wouldn't have stopped that.
no blame attached. The marking to prevent the shot, however, that's a whole nother story. But no, credit to Watford, and I should say a little nod to Robbie Savage. That's Edlin Guardiola, not Guardiola, as he repeatedly said during the BT commentary today. So cheers for that, Sav. What do we expect, really? But congratulations to Watford, fully deserved overall, and yeah, I can't say a bad word about them. So fair play to them. Let's move on to the other FA Cup game then. We'll come back down to the Manchester United West Ham game. This ended in a 1-1 draw. Dimitri Payet with a sumptuous free kick. I mean, this lad is having the time of his life at West Ham. He's found a club that properly love him, and a manager, I think, that does the same in Bilic. And equalised by, I think it was given to Martial, sort of a bit of a scrambled finish, but the goal, nevertheless, from Martial with 7 minutes to go means there's a replay at Upton Park. Who do you favour in this? Because I thought West Ham, for large periods, looked the better side offensively, but United seemed to dominate the ball. So can you pick a winner from these two now?
West Ham.
Yep.
West Ham all day long. I mean, from what I saw on Facebook, on Twitter afterwards, Man United fans were just kind of complaining that they had to go through that again, and it was just being drawn out. At this, it's almost like West Ham had slit their throat, and now they've just got to wait another couple of weeks to finally die. It wasn't pretty for Man United, and the fans didn't seem to enjoy it. They don't seem to have much faith of going to West Ham and turning it round. And West Ham fans think they've got it in the bag already. So I'm fully in favour. I think the Bullen Ground, which is going to want a big send off anyway, I think West Ham have got that all day long.
Yeah, it's definitely got a whiff of, as you say, the Bowling Ground sort of rocking on a Tuesday night replay. Quick question, though, for you on this game. If, I know it's hypothetical, if Manchester United were to win that and actually win the FA Cup and finished fourth, could they turn around, or could Louis van Gaal turn around and say, we've had a successful season? Or would that be a sort of, bringing it back to Arsenal maybe, would it be a touch of papering over the cracks?
I think that's what Man United fans would have expected from the start of the season, isn't it? To get fourth, to get back in the Champions League and to win a trophy. So I wouldn't call that success. I'd call that the bare minimum for Man United. I mean, that might be tough because they haven't been good this year. And maybe they haven't been good enough to finish fourth or to finish third and to push on and be something quite quote unquote successful this season. But I wouldn't call that success. I would call that what they needed to do after the past couple of seasons they've had.
I think that's a fair comment. A club of that stature, as you say, the minimum you'd expect would be challenging on all fronts, and they haven't challenged on many fronts. So, no, I think that's absolutely right. Not a lot else to say about the game, really. As I say, it was a decent watch between two sides that are very sort of different parallels or parallel universe of confidence. Very, very odd to watch, but nevertheless, a decent game to watch. And as you say, I think the replay heavily favours West Ham, but you never know. Magic of the cup and all that. We'll round off the weekend's review of sort of the top flight, if you will. There was the one Premier League game today, and we'll also just touch on one that is coming up tomorrow. Spurs won at Villa. That in itself is probably not a big shock. I think it's fair to say two goals from Harry Kane. Do you think this is quite an important result? Sounds silly to say Tottenham have been a bit patchy in recent weeks, but they have just had a few results that would cause alarm, particularly in the Westfalenstadion on Thursday, where they were truly battered by Borussia Dortmund. This result, Villa or no Villa, it puts them closer to Leicester. Obviously, Leicester play on Monday. We'll touch on that in a second. Is this a pretty big result for Spurs, given the context?
Yeah, you'd have to say so. I mean, they've got to keep pace with Leicester and hope someone can slow them down. So it was never exactly a banana skin tie because Aston Villa have been all over the place. I mean, they barely got any media attention this week because everyone just thinks they're going down, so it doesn't matter. I mean, it's a job they had to do, especially after the midweek against Dortmund. But I think realistically speaking, could have been a lot more, and they did need a few more goals if they could, just in case it comes down to goal difference. But no, I think it's a fair result. I think it's a good result. They've just got to make sure that whatever happens after Dortmund it goes in their favour, because this is, of course, the time, as we've said week in, week out, that you expect them to start slowing down any day now, and there have been some results and some performances that suggest they're slowly getting there. So big 3 points, and it might be a big 3 points if they go somewhere else, for instance, and they do slow down and they have a bad day. So it could still be a big 3 points.
Yeah, absolutely. So all they can really do, so much as it pains me to say, is keep winning. That's all they can do. Now, we went off the air last week saying that we'd heard that Steve McClaren was to be sacked. I don't think any of us expected it to drag on for a whole week before the inevitable did happen. The slightly surprising thing, though, is that we thought David Moyes, or I certainly was informed that David Moyes was the likely candidate. And what do we know? Rafa Benitez pops up, and he takes his charges to the King Power Stadium tomorrow night. I think it is tomorrow night, isn't it? I'm not.
Yeah, Monday night.
Mine's not playing tricks on me. Now, this is a test for Leicester, isn't it? Not so much in the opposition, but there's the new manager bounce. There's the pressure of knowing that Spurs have closed the gap today. There's the pressure knowing that Man City have dropped points, so they'll be expected to pull further away. Newcastle, on the other hand, as we said, the new manager bounce, the fresh feel, the promise of something positive, at least, which is more than they've had most of the season. Can you call this? Do you still see the Leicester bandwagon rolling on, or do you think Rafa's got enough in the tank to put a spanner in the works?
If I was putting a bet on, I'd go for Leicester, but this is one that I would look at and go nowhere near, because there's just too many variables, too many spots and maybes, no certainties and no guarantees in this one. I'm going to miss the game because I'm going to be doing my radio show, unfortunately, but I would love to see Newcastle set up under Rafa. I really am looking forward to seeing what he does with them. I'd be even more interested to see what he does with them at the end of the season if they go down. I'd be fascinated to know if he's going to stay or go. But I think he's the best man for the job. I said last week, I think you asked me if Steve McClaren goes and if they get someone new in, do they stay up or do they go down? And I said flat out they'd go down. And the reason I said that is because I didn't even imagine they'd get Rafa Benitez in. I mean, he started at Real Madrid this season, so it's a bizarre situation. But for Newcastle, fantastic opportunity to prove yourself and show what you can do. And as I said a couple of weeks back, Leicester are still not the toughest team to beat. They're only doing well because they've got so many goals on the side, and Vardy and Mahrez have been electric, and they're the ones that dragged them through most of this season. If they had half the goals they've got now, they wouldn't be anywhere near first. So they're still not the toughest team to beat in the world, and you never know. The new manager bounce, as you say, it might play in Newcastle's favour.
I totally agree with you on the betting stakes. Don't bet, kids. It's bad for you. Trust me, we know. But if you are going to bet, maybe look at Champions League. Don't bet on Newcastle and Leicester, because it's just got an absolute nasty streak running through it all over from what I can see. But no, I'm with you. We read the Newcastle squad out on last week's pod. There's way too much talent there, in my opinion, to just fold over and die. And I just think that a manager like Benitez could get the best out of them, I think. And we shall see, because as you say, it's going to be really interesting to see what he does with them and how he sets them up. So
I think the thing he's got to learn quickly is you can't just set Newcastle up to keep clean sheets. You've got to set them up to win.
Yeah.
There's no good keeping clean sheets and just getting a couple of draws here and there, because the other teams around you are going to snap up wins against some of the smaller sides. So it's going to be big for him to make sure that they're a solid unit at the back, because that's where they've been bad all season. But he can't ignore the front line either.
No, absolutely. It's going to be tough for Rafa, but that starts the week, and then of course we've got a Premier League programme coming into the following week. We should just let our listeners know really what the fixtures are, shouldn't we, so they can plan. We see Everton Arsenal, which is on the Saturday, the 12:45. Palace Leicester again. Tough-looking game. Palace certainly need the points still, that's for sure. West Brom Norwich, again, you really think Norwich need to be getting something from that game. These are the 3 o'clocks, I should stress. Watford Stoke, a bit of a dead rubber, but again, chance for both sides to move at the table. Chelsea West Ham, nice London derby there. Then you've got the evening game, which is Swansea Aston Villa, which again you'd expect Swansea to pull clear of trouble with a win there. Southampton, your boys, take on Liverpool on the 1:30 kickoff on Sunday, followed by at the same time as, I should say, the Tyne Weir derby, isn't it, or Tyne Tees derby? I can never get this right. It's a derby between Newcastle and Sunderland. We'll say that much. A big game for both managers, really big game. And then on the 4 o'clock games, you've got Tottenham, Bournemouth, and Manchester City, Manchester United. Another derby. Isn't it funny how Sky have 2 derbies on the same day?
No, how coincidental.
Isn't it funny? It's almost like they scheduled it. How bizarre. Who'd have thought?
I can't be the only one watching the Southampton Liverpool game when Newcastle Sunderland's on, but there you go.
I think you might be. I might be following it, but I must confess I'll probably be watching the old Newcastle Sunderland game myself.
Fine.
Yeah, big and fun. Right, we won't bother with the table because there's been so little results. All we will say is obviously that Bournemouth look like they're safe on 38 points in 13th place, and Spurs have cut the gap to 2 points with their win at Villa today. Villa are doomed. We already knew that. Let's move on. Let's quickly just touch on the Championship, and then we'll finish with some questions from our listeners. A couple of really good questions this week. So there's just a couple of things we wanted to touch on because the Championship pod that we're talking about doing as a special, we're going to do during the international break. We don't know which day yet, but we're going to record just you and I and maybe one other, depending on what happens. We might see if we can source somebody else, maybe give a debut to somebody. But we're going to do a special pod on the Championship as a whole during that international break. So we just wanted to touch on a couple of things this weekend. So I'll hand it over to you and bring us up to speed on the bits you want to mention.
Yeah, I mean, there's two colossal stories from the Championship. I mean, it should be said this week, if you've not followed the Championship as much as perhaps I do, then you need to have a look at the results. You need to have a look at the table because this one has been a complete shake-up at the top and the bottom. But realistically speaking, the stories from the Championship this week are not in the league. They're not in the results or on the pitch. They are managerial moves. The big news is Aitor Karanka at Middlesbrough. I had absolutely no idea where this came from. I woke up on Saturday morning, I jumped on my computer, turned it on, checked the news, and suddenly it was reported that Karanka has stormed out of a Middlesbrough team meeting and said he no longer wanted to manage them. And very quickly it became apparent that it was a real story. It wasn't some newspaper fluff, and suddenly it was announced that he wouldn't be in charge of the Charlton game the next day. So Steve Agnew had to take training on Saturday, then took the game on Sunday, which they eventually lost 2-0 to a very game Charlton. I watched the whole thing, and Charlton were more than worthy of those points. But I mean, that's a colossal movement at the top to have Aitor Karanka. I mean, he's not gone yet. It's expected any day now. But I don't know about you, but I think that's big. That's huge for the top three. That should really open the door for Hull.
Massively. I mean, it's just totally. I was just going to say I might try that with my Sunday League team, but the trouble is, if I said that, they'd probably say, "Okay, no worries, cheerio." So I don't think I'll risk it. But no, you just don't hear it, do you? You don't hear a manager come out and be that honest and that blunt. I mean, unless there's something gone on that we don't know about, which I'm sure will come out if so. For a side that, okay, yeah, they've struggled the last few weeks, but. I mean, this was their year, wasn't it? You talk about Arsenal's year and coming up. This was the year Middlesbrough were back, wasn't it? And
I mean, the story goes. I mean, they'd won after this weekend. I believe it's 3-11, and Karanka had just said, "You don't want this. You know, you've really not done enough to show that you want to play in the Premier League." But on the same token, he says that to the players. But last week when they played Rotherham, he said in the build-up to that game that was the biggest banana skin. It was the biggest game because they could very easily lose that because Rotherham have been on the rebound from hiring Neil Warnock. They were in a good run of form. It was going to be a tough game, and they lost. So to say that about 5 days previously against a very good Rotherham team all of a sudden, and then say to your players, you don't want this enough, that's a huge turnaround. To warn them that they could be in trouble against a very game Rotherham, to then get the result that you almost predicted, and then say the players haven't got enough in them. I mean, it's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre, and I don't think it shrouds him in that good a light, because suddenly he gets a very bad reputation for throwing his toys out the pram, doesn't he?
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And this is a manager, let's not forget, that was being linked with some of the top jobs in world football. I mean, you know, this guy is so highly thought of by people like Mourinho, by the Real Madrid hierarchy, and essentially he's thrown the towel in, which is it's bizarre. But let's touch a couple of other clubs. There was another sacking, wasn't there, this weekend, which we should touch on, and it came in Nottingham. Are we surprised?
I was more shocked that they hired him than I was that they fired him. The thing about it was not so much that they fired him, it was just the timing of it, because I would have thought with about 10 games to go, whatever it is in the Championship now, that they would have just stuck with him just to see him out, because he's not done an awful job, don't get me wrong. I mean, Dougie Freedman came in from Bolton, I believe it was, where obviously he had a tough time because Bolton were in financial straits and they were on their way down the league table. So he didn't have the greatest job in the world there, but he he did enough to show that he was a manager with potential. I didn't see him turning up at Nottingham Forest. I was amazed to see Nottingham Forest hire him because the chairman has got all this ambition of being back in the Premier League and he's pumping all this money into it and he's building slowly and all this kind of stuff. To go for a manager that had not done brilliantly with what he had at Bolton, to put them in the position he did, also didn't do brilliantly at Crystal Palace when he was there, the managerial job he had beforehand. So then suddenly jump to a Nottingham Forest team that before this season started I thought was with a genuine shout of promotion or at least the top six is madness. For him to stick with him this whole season, to let him build the team, to guide them through this long into the game, this season I should say, 36 games at this point, it's ridiculous to think he's just gone now. But at the same time, does it surprise me that he's gone? No, I thought he would have gone midway through the season. He was atrocious in, I think it was November, December. They had an awful run, and I was expecting him to go then. But they stuck with him, and now they've randomly pulled the plug. So it's a strange one. It's absolutely doesn't shock me that he's gone, but the fact that it was just, I was just browsing around on Twitter and then suddenly it happened. That was the strange thing for me. The big question now, obviously, will be who he gets in next. And Fawaz is a guy that seems to like the hipsters kind of manager, the one that's got a big future but hasn't really had the chance yet. So I wouldn't be staggered to see a Gary Monk go in at Nottingham Forest or even a Tim Sherwood. I think Tim Sherwood would be right up Fawaz's alley.
Oh, tactics, Tim. Yeah, get him in. Or maybe a combination of Stuart Pearce and the entire staff of a Direct Line call centre. Maybe that is the hipster way to go. Maybe
it's a strange thing with Nottingham Forest. I mean, I sent out a tweet earlier in the season when Swindon sat their manager and placed them with their chairman, and I sent out a tweet that said, that's one of the weirdest managerial changes you'll see this season. But let's not forget that Queen's Park Rangers and Nottingham Forest haven't thrown their hat into that ring yet. I mean, wait for one of them to sack someone and hire a stick. And Nottingham Forest could very easily do something like that because it's just the way they are. They pick the strangest managerial choices. Stuart Pearce was a strange one a couple of seasons back. It was Billy Davis came back a couple of seasons before that. Now they got Dougie Freeman. I'm almost certain it's going to be Tim Sherwood at the moment, but they've got their coach in charge for now. So let's see how it goes at the end of the season because Karanka could be out of a job and Steve McLaren, I think, is going to be a very attractive proposition for the championship. So some big names flying around now.
No, absolutely. Darren Fletcher, the commentator on BBC and for Five Live and BT, he's spoken very passionately about the situation at Forest. Well worth a listen on 606. I think it was last week. I think it was very, very interesting. But speaking of a club that do have a new manager, we should just quickly touch on two other stories this weekend. Firstly, Rotherham, Neil Warnock. He went to Sheffield Wednesday and won last week. His biggest rival of his fabled supporting of Sheffield United, he went to Wednesday and won. And then this week, he kind of went almost one better. They didn't quite win this week, but 3-0 down with 10 minutes to go. And then decided, no, we've had enough of this and pulled out a 3-3. Would it be fair to say that the Derby caretaker manager, head youth coach, whatever Mr. Wassell is known as, fair to say lack of experience cost him this game?
Oh, I don't know why they put him in the first place. I mean, the Championship is not the place to cut your teeth as a manager. This is not the place to do it because every single kick matters. It's not just points. Every single kick matters in this division. And to have your manager leave and then to move up one of your younger coaches is bizarre. And I think he did find out the hard way that this division demands you be on it every single second because Rotherham needed those points and that will feel like a win to them. For Derby, I'm staggered that they've done it again. They just seem intent every single season on making life as difficult as they possibly can. And considering Cardiff and Birmingham and Ipswich and Preston, they're all still right beneath them. They could still grab them. It's a dangerous game to be playing, sacking the manager, replacing him with a coach. But, they'll do it again. They'll sit back in summer. They'll bring someone else in. I have a feeling it will be Gary Monk. And then they'll go from there. But it's strange. It's absolutely strange. And this game did typify everything that's going wrong with the Derby at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And bizarre set of circumstances there. We should also say, just very briefly, not too much more than to say that Bolton, their short-term future at least is safe. They've had the takeover from the Dean Holdsworth. I've read the word Whatsit on Twitter there, and I said Whatsit. See, this is what happens when you're looking at two things at once. Dean Whatsit would be a fantastic name, I should stress.
Absolutely.
But his good friend Dean Holdsworth, who looks partial to what's it or two. It has to be said at this stage of his career. He's his consortium or led consortium of his choosing has taken over Bolton, and I think it's good news, isn't it? Whether you're
it's fantastic.
whoever a fan you are, Bolton are one of that sort of grand old club, and particularly with the sad passing of Phil Gutside recently, I think it's good news for a club with a real sort of passionate local support. So good news for them. We should say there are a couple of midweek fixtures this week. Hull Forest is on Tuesday, as is Ipswich Blackburn and Brighton Reading. Big game for Brighton, that, because they'll see this as an opportunity with Middlesbrough's fall. And then next weekend, I suppose the highlight fixture is Middlesbrough Hull on the Friday night.
Oh, that's going to be a big game now,
isn't it? Absolutely huge. And then looking at the
Let's not forget the Derby game, though. Derby versus Nottingham Forest, 12:30 kickoff next weekend.
Took the words right out of my mouth. That will be keenly contested. Isn't Leeds Huddersfield a derby as well?
That does ring a bell. I could be wrong, but that does ring a bell, yeah.
I think it's a Yorkshire derby. So, and again, MK Dons, Brighton away at MK Dons, depending on the result Brighton get earlier on in the week. Again, Brighton will see this as a real opportunity. And Burnley, who I have to say are really impressing me. They look dead certs, don't they? I mean, they're at home to Wolves, and you'd think that Sean Dyche's men are on the way up. They are 74 points, so they are 7 points clear of Middlesbrough in second.
Yeah, considering Middlesbrough are now about to lose their manager, Hull are just all over the place at this moment in time, and Brighton just you can't rely on Brighton too much. They've got to be favourites for this now.
Yeah, the Ginger Mourinho is coming back. Good stuff. Right, okay, that rounds up our main chunk of the pod. We'll finish, as we always do, with a couple of listener questions. You get the honour of answering all of them with No Danny this week, so aren't you lucky? We've had 3 from one person and a couple of other ones, so I'll ask you to keep your answers punchy and we'll rattle through these. So the first one, I'll do all of Bren's questions all in a row. So this is Bren at Kane_U_dig_it. Lots of underscores there, Bren. Need to change that. Right, the first question is this going to be the strangest top 4 in recent memory, and should we expect this from now on? I imagine he's referring to the Premier League.
I couldn't say until the season's over, because 4th is still anyone's game, I think. I mean, West Ham are still in it, United, Arsenal, Man City, and there's still a couple of clubs underneath that could still sneak in. So, but at the same time, it could very easily just end up with status quo. Everyone in the top 4 being in the top 4, and I think we're kind of used to them being in the top 4 after this season. So it's kind of tricky, I suppose. If you look historically, then yeah, it's weird to see Tottenham and Leicester, especially Leicester, in there. But I think realistically, we've got to save to the end of the season, see who sneaks into 4th.
Yep. And on the same vein, the second part of Bren's question, do you think Spurs and Leicester are going to be extremely outclassed in Europe next season? I think that's an excellent question.
I think for Leicester, it would depend on who they get in their group. I mean, if they pull a Valencia or someone of that ilk, then they'll probably fatter their chances. But if they get stuck in a nightmare group, then yeah, they could get absolutely pasted. Spurs, I don't see Spurs getting outclassed, but at the same time, they did get royally dumped out by Dortmund in the week, and I don't think this midweek game for them is going to get any better than the home tie. So, I mean, that could be they shifted their priorities this season. I don't know, but I think they'll do better than Leicester will. But I wouldn't go as far as outclassed. But at the same time, I don't think they're built for the Champions League just yet.
No, I would say that's going to be Mr. Poch's biggest challenge next season. And Leicester, I think they'll just go and enjoy it, much like Ghent did from the Belgian league this year. I think it could go one of 2 ways. It could go Everton, or it could go Chelsea on mad run. Nobody ever expects them. You just never know, do you, the way they're playing. Got Ranieri, of course, who has experience. Right, the third question from Bren was, with the top 4 shake-up, do you think the Champions League coefficient for England is in great jeopardy? That's one of John's favourites, the old coefficient.
Well, I think you would probably agree. You watch far more European football than I do. But yeah, I mean, I was worried about it from the start of the season when there was first rumblings that we could lose Champions League spot. I don't think this season has helped that. I think it's been great domestically, don't get me wrong. But for our standing in Europe, I don't think this season's done much for us. And if Leicester and Tottenham finish inside the top 4 and then go on to tank it in the Champions League next year, yeah, I mean, I've been afraid of it for a long time. And as nice as it is domestically, I think European-wise, it's not the best for us this year.
No, I think that's very, very well put. Another question then. This is from our good friends who's writing every week. It's at Checky Nando's Lad. He wants to know, out of the teams left in the FA Cup, who would be your ideal final matchup? I like that question.
Oh man,
I'll give you mine. I'd love a West Ham Watford final.
I think I would say West Ham Everton, personally, because they're both teams that historically say we could win this every single season and get annoyed when they get knocked out in the fourth round. But also, they had a great game the other week as well. Two very open sides that will go for it, and you've got some really, really great players on display. So I think as an end of year spectacle, I think seeing Dimitri Payet put another incredible free kick in the back of the net, and Ross Barkley to unleash one from 30 yards, and Lukaku and Lanzini to do something incredible. Yeah, I think that'd be my pick. But...
Good shout. Yeah, notice none of us went for Palace there.
Yeah.
It's nothing against Palace. It may just be a slight. Can't really.
I'm surprised Palace are still in it. So.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I couldn't bear Pardew's mug lifting that cup. You'd never hear the end of it, would you?
No, I think he still tells people about the Johnson's Paint Trophy in 2010. So.
I still think he takes it down crystals with him on a Friday night. To be honest, it's painful. But yeah, no, I can see your point there. I hope Watford go on to win it just because they really impressed me today, and West Ham would probably be my other choice. But there's a part of me being biased as an Arsenal fan that I don't want West Ham to get too successful too quickly with what's going to happen with them. So yeah,
honestly, I would say I would enjoy any final from the five that we've got now in the hat. I enjoy any final, but it's
yeah.
If I've got to pick a preference, then yeah.
It'll be interesting for me having the last two seasons, obviously having watched it with so much on the line for us. I can now sit back and sort of enjoy the game again. So it'll be interesting. And a fun trivia fact: can you remember the last time Everton were in the FA Cup final?
2009. Was
it really?
I think so, because that was Chelsea. I remember watching that.
I remember when they last won it. But I think you're right. They did, yeah. Do you remember when
I remember Chelsea. I remember sitting in my front room watching that game, and Chelsea were in the most disgusting yellow kit I've ever seen in my life.
That's right.
I can't remember if it was Chelsea or Everton in that yellow kit now, but it was disgusting. I think it was 1-0. Frank Lampard scored that one.
I think you're right. See, I'm very old. I can still remember when they won it in 1995.
Ooh.
When Paul Rideout got the winner, heading past a mid-air starfish by Peter Schmeichel. And Rideout got three at the back post, and I think Andre Kanchelskis was playing for Everton. That's how long ago that was.
This is completely off topic, and it's going to chew through time, I think. But quick question: out of all the FA Cup finals that you've seen in your lifetime, which is your favourite?
Oh, see, that's tough. That's really tough.
Because I know mine like that. For me, it's Liverpool West Ham.
I was going to say the Liverpool West Ham one is the one that really stands out for sheer drama. I'd have to say the Arsenal Chelsea one in Cardiff holds particular highlights for me, just because it was that side in its pomp. It's a fantastic game. Cardiff was a very underrated venue for cup finals, I must admit. But I think you're right. No, I think you're absolutely right. Also, of course, the Arsenal famous the Charlie George final against Man United. I think that would probably stand out to me as one that I don't remember. Because I was too young to remember that sort of far back, but I can remember sort of the imagery coming from it, if you will. So, yeah, I suppose, yeah, I think of my living memory, I'd have to agree with you. West Ham, Liverpool.
Yeah, I still remember the Southampton Arsenal final in 2003. I still got vivid memories of weeping like the teenager, or not the teenager, the toddler that I was when we lost that game. But for just the sheer memories of the game. And the things that I can see in my mind's eye when I think about it, it's that West Ham Liverpool one, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We could do a whole podcast sort of on memories and stuff. But I also remember the Alan Sunderland, the footage of Alan Sunderland's winner, and I think it was 79. I may be wrong there. I'm sure I'll be absolutely lynched if I'm wrong. I think it was 79.
Well, it wasn't 76. I can tell you that one.
Phew. Well, Arsenal, Alan Sunderland scored, and he basically just ran away. I think that was actually against Man United. I'm sure it was. I'm sure that was the 79 Cup final.
Oh, hey, have both of us got a famous Man United victory in the FA Cup final?
We do. In fact, we have two, because we beat on penalties when we were absolutely terrible that day.
Very nice.
But yes, Sunderland scores the winner and basically just races off screaming expletives into the camera. It's one of it's one of the iconic memories of FA Cup history. So, and I can also say, sidebar, I can definitely remember the FA Cup final that hurts the most. And that would be Arsenal 1, Liverpool 2, when Michael Owen decided to tear Lee Dixon and Tony Adams a new one after Sami Hyypiä handballed off the line at 1-0 up. And I will never, ever forget that, forget him for that. And yeah, that's still so painful because we lost that in the last 10 minutes. So painful. Anyway, we digress. So you see what happens when you ask questions, people. We go off on tangents.
I know, I was just about to tell you my most painful football memory, but we could be here for hours if we can.
we won't bring up our final in Cardiff, of course, but no, we won't. Here's another one. Nicky G. Wilson, at Nicky G. Wilson, funny enough. He wants to know how and why have all the big clubs, and he puts in brackets, not just Arsenal, bottled the league and FA Cup season this season. I think it's a good point, isn't it? A lot of the big teams have really pooed the nest, to put it bluntly.
Well, I was about to say Man City, but they've actually won one, haven't they? The FA Cup fallout came this year when they were in the middle of their bad patch. Man United have been awful all season. I mean, they're still in the FA Cup, so they could still do something well in that, but they've just been awful for a good 3-4 years now. Chelsea, I like I said on this pod before, Chelsea had to win this FA Cup. I was astounded that they went out yesterday, realistically speaking, because I had them bankers for this all day long. But they just had a miserable season because of Mourinho and the doctor. I guess things just went wrong backstage, and suddenly things just started to tumble. And yeah, I mean, Arsenal. I mean, as Arsenal fans, you'll know it a lot better than I do. The problems that Arsenal have got at the moment. It's just strange. It's just strange that everything's happened this season. I don't think there's a particular cause for it. I mean, every club's different, but I think it's just irony that it's all come together this season, and suddenly there was someone there to take advantage of it. Yeah,
absolutely. And just very random sidebar. Second wrestling mention in this podcast, listeners. I do apologise. When you said the words backstage, we were talking about Newcastle earlier on, and it just briefly reminded me. Do you remember that story ages ago when there was talk that Vince McMahon was interested in Newcastle?
Oh, that comes up every single year.
Can you imagine? I mean, it would just be, Arsenal fans think Stan Kroenke's bad. I mean, could you imagine Vince McMahon with a Premier League side?
Vince likes his money too much. He'd be astounded to know you have to put money into that and never get it.
Yeah,
so he wouldn't go for a soccer team.
And he'd want to write the storylines for the cup. Yeah, he really would, wouldn't he? Bless him. And he'd be in the manager's headset the whole game, telling him what to do. Oh, crikey, there we go.
It's a shame these references are going to be so missed on some of us.
I know, people are going to be like, oh, God, listen to these two geeks rattle on. Two more, and then we'll let people enjoy their evenings stroke mornings. Checkaholic, the regular listener, evening to you. He says, with £30 away ticket cap and Arsenal's being £26, is fan power really having an effect on the Premier League? I appreciate you could go for hours on that, but in short, do you think it's a good thing, and do you think it'll be taken to another level beyond this?
Yeah, I'd like to think if it goes well next season and it proves that more people will turn up and you will eventually get more money out of it, then it could evolve to the home games, because that's the big one. I remember in League One, I used to go to the Johnson's Paint Trophy games for £5, and now it's like 45 quid / 50 quid to go to a home game in the Premier League. So, it's money in the Premier League, the ticket price in the Premier League needed to change, especially the away end, because there's so much travel involved. I'll be out of university when the next season starts. I would love to finally get around to start touring some of the grounds, and if they're going to be 30 quid a ticket, maybe I'm going to be able to, so it's going to open some doors for people like me and for so many others. So I think it's a great start. If it goes well next season, I think we'll definitely see a development of the home tickets being knocked down as well.
Absolutely. If you ever fancy a wet, windy day at Plymouth Argyle, do give me a shout.
That's the only away game I've ever been to, actually.
Yeah,
away game. I remember watching Gareth Bale run down the wing and going, "Wow, what the hell?"
What a pleasure of that. And Danny's joining us for a run-in. We haven't actually wrapped up, Danny, but you can say hello to our listeners if you like.
What have you texted me for then?
Oh, I've just said that we're wrapping up in 2 minutes. That's all.
Oh dear, I knew I should have read it.
You can say hello to our listeners.
Oh dear, listeners.
In fact, as soon as you're here, do you want to answer the last question from our lovely listeners?
I'd love to give it a go if I can do it without swearing.
Yeah, thanks for that. It comes from Donaldson_Brian, who is Brian Donaldson to his friends.
Big Brian, I know him well.
And he asks this question: have times changed with a new Premier League champion about to be crowned and a different FA Cup winner? It's almost like it was written for you, Danny.
It certainly has changed. Money has changed everything. People taking everything for granted. You look back over the last decade, 15 years, Arsenal, Chelsea, Man United, Man City, And where are those now? Nowhere. So it just shows you that you can take money for granted, but it doesn't mean you're going to win stuff. And I think it's, from an Arsenal fan's point of view, as long as Spurs don't win the title, if Leicester win the Premier League, and I'd love to see Everton win the FA Cup, and that just showed. I can't remember a time in Premier League history where you've had so much diversity in who wins what and who beats who. I think it's fantastic for football, and long may it continue.
And you answered, without even realising, you answered one of our other listeners' questions about who we'd like to see in the final. So you've pinned your colours to Everton. So
I'd like to see Southampton win something, just because I like them. Not because Ross is here, but I think Southampton do things properly, like Everton do, like West Ham are doing, like many clubs are doing. They're not buying their way to glory. They're starting at the bottom and working their way up with their youths, and I think that's how football should be done.
Very well said. Very well said. Well,
thank you very much.
As we wrap up, Danny, I know the listeners are desperate to know how the new bathroom is. So
have you been talking about it?
Well, we might have mentioned the fact that you were having tonight off because you've had a busy week of watching other people do work. So
I had 4 hours sleep one day. My friends come over. Normally they're here till about 3 a.m, and I had to ask them to leave at about 12:30 because I was so tired.
Oh, it's a hard life. Not
we
doing
have
much.
no sink. We have no sink. We have a toilet that looks like a painter's radio, literally. We've got one wall tiled with these massive big tiles. They look very nice. And maybe I'll tweet a picture of it. And they come around the rest of the flatten the ceiling. And got to do my bedroom ceiling as well. So my bedroom is very moist at the moment.
So remember, listeners, you too can help for just £2 a month. You can give Danny
£2 a month. The tiles cost me 350 quid on their own. How dare you?
Maybe this campaign isn't going to get off the ground then. No, we'll have to draw a line.
The bath is costing me 700 quid.
Good grief.
It's an 8-jet jacuzzi bath. Hello. That'll get to places where I haven't been seen since the Dark Ages.
Well, that sounds like a good place as any to wrap this pod up, as people will hopefully be enjoying their breakfast. So thanks for that.
Breakfast.
Danny, you'll hopefully be back with us next week.
I certainly will do. I'll be more organised. Finished midweek.
And I'm sure we'll be able to talk about another famous Arsenal collapse against Everton, so that'll be fun to get our teeth stuck into.
And Barcelona.
Don't even go there. But that is pretty much it for me and Ross and Danny's brief cameo. So thank you to you all. I should just say, quick plug, the interview I did with Simon Collings, friend of the pod, that is up. You can listen to that now. It's about the sort of media spotlight of football and journalism standpoint. Very interesting chat with Simon. You can have a look at that. Also have a look at our website. Check out our latest blogs, Team of the Week, Hipsters Choice, all that usual good stuff. We will return with our usual 4 crew for tomorrow's pod. Well, me and 3 others. And indeed, we, myself and John, are planning this week to get a satchel done after the climax of the Champions League.
If you can get all the tears and snot out of your individual beards.
Oh, I'm sure
we'll crying like children.
I'm sure we'll manage. We'll have plenty of other things to talk. Me and John will just sit and talk about Juventus and Bayern and pretend Arsenal don't exist. It'll be fine.
And mighty Dortmund.
Yes, we'll just pretend Arsenal were never in the Champions League in the first place. It'll
Never
all be
heard
fine.
of them.
No, but thank you very much, Ross, for your time this evening. 2-man crew. We probably talked more than 3 of us, so you got to love that. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you as ever.
And Danny, thank you for coming in and tearing the last few minutes of the pod apart. Beautifully done. That has been the Football Hipsters English Breakfast. Thank you very much for listening. Keep your glasses trendy and your beard strong, whichever way round you like it. It's good enough for us. And we'll speak to you on the pod tomorrow and throughout the week with our various episodes. Keep it football. Enjoy.
Bergkamp. That's magnificent.
Mark Vivian Foet, Sinclair's cross over Cunningham. Di Canio!
Oh, I do not believe that. That is sensational.
Tissier. He's going for goal again. Oh! Only Matthew Le Tissier can score goals like that.
Collymore closing in.